Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to our today's session. We have two more sessions left with the invited lecturers and then one with your presentations. So today, our guest is Kowalik from the University of Tromsø, and he wrote as his doctoral dissertation that he defended last year, a grammar of spoken South Sami, and he also contributed to GramAdapt and worked together with the team of GramAdapt while collecting the data on the context situation with South Sami and Swedish/Norwegian, but he will probably talk about that himself. So I'm not going to steal any more time from the lecture. We are very happy to have you here. Thank you for agreeing to take part in this course, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Xenia. Yeah, I think I wasn't quite aware what I stumbled into when I said yes to contributing to the GramAdapt one. I think it was just a time when I said, yeah, of course, I'll do it. But thank you for inviting me to this course, and it is indeed something that I enjoyed doing. It puts me a bit outside my usual field of expertise, but yeah, we'll come to that. So I hope the title was catchy enough for all of you to join. But let's look at the outline. I recognize a couple of names among you, so you probably know already a bit about South Sami. But of course, we need to start with a general introduction about South Sami. However, I will focus on its sociolinguistic setting. And then I'll talk a little bit about early contact and the contact today, before moving on to the GramAdapt questionnaire, or well, the questionnaires that make the database. Not all of them, but some. Then I have an exercise for you, which I plan to last 20 minutes. Then I'll finish up the GramAdapt questionnaire. We will look at a couple of typological traits that well define South Sami and also make it different. And then I think there will be hopefully some time for questions and discussions at the end. Please feel free to interrupt me. I think that's good to do if there's something that you're wondering, and then I will just decide if there's room to answer the question when you ask it, or if we take it at the end. And you can also please also use the chat for comments or questions. Yes, I like to start with a slide about who am I, because we will be sharing 1.5 hours together, and well, maybe it's nicer for you to know who's speaking. So I'm born in East Germany when it still was East. I studied Nordic languages, but quite quickly stumbled into Sami. So I think I can say that I've been studying Samic languages for 15 years now. Also a bit in northern Norway. I took my MA in general linguistics at Stockholm University, and I also did my PhD at Stockholm, which, as Xenia said, is a grammar of contemporary South Sami. So my expertise is in language description and in a synchronic understanding of South Sami. So that's where you can put me. I'm currently doing a postdoc in Tromsø, which is about language technology. We can talk about this later, but for the Samic languages, since they are spoken in Norway and since Norway has lots of money, there is quite a lot of projects about language technology for small Sami languages. Yeah, I live on a farm in Tynset, that's 5 hours north of Oslo, kind of the same height as Helsinki. And I have a wife and 2 kids. And when I'm not working at the desk, I'm working on our house or with our goats. So usually I don't get bored. Anyway, introduction. So I want to start with the Samic languages, and you can of course argue about this, but let's say we have 9 Samic languages, which form a dialect continuum stretching from kind of where I live, which would be at the very southern tip of the South Sami area, until the far east of the Kola Peninsula. And I think it's important to see that it is per definition, it is often said that the Samic languages form a dialect continuum, and they certainly did. However, the language situation today would leave you with many gaps in this continuum. And I think that's important to remember. And also, languages have been moving around, their speakers are moving around, and we have a very severe sort of power law distribution within the Samic languages. For instance, North Sami has about 18,000 speakers, which is about, I don't know, 85 or 90% of all Sami that speak a Samic language. Just a side note, North Sami has, interestingly, 3 contact languages, Norwegian and Swedish, belonging to the Germanic languages, and Finnish. You could also add Torne Valley Finnish, then you would have the 4th. So North Sami is definitely interesting from the point of language contact as well. But we are today looking closer into South Sami, which has, we have no official numbers. So all the numbers that I'm giving you, they are approximates. You would find them in, I don't know, the Ethnologue or Wikipedia, and they are also based or adjusted based on my own and colleagues from the field, or even South Sami colleagues' experience in the field. So usually you say that South Sami has somewhere around 500 to 1,000, let's call them language users. And the contact languages are today Norwegian and Swedish. And the contact has been going on since very long, at least 1,500 years. Yeah, that is the area of South Sami, the circle in blue. A couple of more numbers. I think it was 2012 when they tried to gather information about how many South Sami, how many Sami are there. That report failed, so we don't really know. And since ethnic, since information about belonging to an ethnicity or any religious group or so are not tracked in Scandinavia, we don't have any official numbers. So this is a rough estimate, but let's say that there are maybe 2,000 or 3,000 people who identify themselves as South Sami. And of these, I would estimate that there are maybe 300 to 500, let's call them active speakers, so that are fluent in the language and use it to promote or to teach or to use the language as a functional language. This is also important to keep in mind. I think it's almost as it is almost that I sometimes forget about it, but all South Sami speakers today are bilingual, and the respective Scandinavian language is by far their stronger language. If we adjust the number of language users and say that there are maybe 1,000 language users, then I might include myself, who produces some South Sami, I don't know, once or twice a week, and definitely has some knowledge about the grammar, but I can't speak fluently. I can usually start talking with my consultants, but then I need to switch after a couple of minutes. And maybe we have some 100 or so active writers. So people who use the language in its written form more or less on a daily basis in media or education or as well, translators or yeah, and so on. And given the total number of Sami or language users, this number I think is quite high. So lots of people are activists. Many Sami are activists, and yeah, so they always have a lot to do. If you're translating South Sami, you never run out of projects. The degree of mutual intelligibility among the Sami languages. Let's go back to the map. So A understands B, B understands C. This is how a dialect continuum would work. However, our neighbors to the north, do you see my arrow as well? Do you share? Yes, good. So I'm pointing at Sami and Sami. They may be together 50 people or so who speak these two languages, and they're confined to a couple of very tiny places. So actually, this is kind of a gap already. And then we have Lula Sami and Northern Sami. So South Sami don't really understand Lula or North Sami. They can recognize words. They definitely do not understand North Sami. If you're familiar with Germanic languages, you could say North Sami and South Sami is like Norwegian or Swedish and German. I don't know, maybe Lula Sami and South Sami is like Finnish and Estonian. Applied to any outlier of the Romance languages. Of course, the closer you get, the more contact you have. Thank you for your question. Yeah, and the map also demonstrated another important thing for South Sami, and that is its size, the area size where we find speakers of South Sami traditionally. There's a north-south stretch of approximately 400 kilometers, maybe also the same in east-west. And the language has no natural center, which differs from, for instance, Inari Sami, who is a language that is in size comparable, but confined to a much smaller area. So revitalization works it's much easier for them than for South Sami. We have a couple of schools and language centers, but no hub culturally or linguistic wise. The speakers of today, let's put them in four boxes, in 4 generations. The oldest generation, which I define as being born before 1950, and that's the generation that I've been working with for my grammar. They are first language speakers of South Sami. They started learning South Sami in a setting where South Sami was the dominant language within the family and with the society around them. And the society was usually small places up in the mountains. However, they usually started school when they turned 7, boarding school, were sent away, and then they, if they hadn't had contact with Scandinavian before that, they would learn Swedish or Norwegian, and they were placed in a context of heavy assimilation politics. Their children, the middle generation, are therefore usually no first language speakers. There are a couple of exceptions, of course, and they are very important, and usually these are all activists or teachers. And they show very much the result of the assimilation politics. Then we have a younger generation, which I don't know, maybe ranges from 30 to 50, something like that. You find an increasing number of second language speakers amongst them. However, they are now in a different setting. They have much more self-confidence. The countries, Sweden and Norway, have differently worked on their minority policies, and there are more rights and more opportunities to, for instance, learn the language or put your kids in daycare. Which brings us to the youngest generation, I know of, I don't know, at least 10, 15, maybe 20 kids that have South Sami as their first language. These are usually very language-aware parents, and usually the exceptions of these middle generations and the younger generations where the language was transmitted. So there are a couple of kids who learn South Sami as their first language. Moving on to early history, so I'm changing a bit focus here, and I think I will try to sort of move through the history, both contact-wise and, well, history-wise, language history-wise. South Sami, or the Southern Samic, Proto-Southern Sami, is proven to have been disintegrated from the Samic branch the earliest, probably just around shortly after our Common Era, around 100 to 200 Common Era, somewhere in Western Finland. And then there are strong indications, arguments that this group moved directly westwards into the traditional South Sami area of today, and did not, as the red arrow shows, did not move northwards to then come southwards. This is kind of still a hypothesis. That's why I put the question mark there. But I think it's a hypothesis that gains in strength to be seen as fact. So this is important to keep in mind when it comes to contact and when it comes to the typological profile of South Sami. In the title, I had this defined by differences, and again, speaking of today, for today, it is very important for South Sami to point out that they have a different culture, a different language, different languages, and a different history. In contrast to Scandinavian languages or the Scandinavian society around them. However, there's also a dichotomy within the Sami community, all Samic languages, and that is on one hand an urge and a need or a longing of unifying Sami as one group with a language that has different variants, one culture, one history, one unity on one side, but also being different on the other. And for instance, the political parliament unites all the Sami groups. But there are, of course, lots of differences, and the Sami parliaments, they are bound to the national states, so you wouldn't have the same in. You have different Sami parliaments in Sweden, Norway, and Finland. So they're kind of torn between trying to unite in order also to be stronger, and trying to find their differences in order to have an identity. And I will just quickly say a couple of things about the typological profile. There are differences that set South Sami apart from the other Samic languages. We will look closer into them towards the end. And for South Sami today, it is not so much important to, they are often not aware of these differences since they are different languages. But they, of course, know either Norwegian or Swedish. And this is very important for Sami to point out the differences. And you would find especially two traits that are pointed out by especially second language speakers. And that is the dual number category in verbal morphology and the basic word order. which is SOV in South Sami and SVO in Swedish Norwegian. I'll come back to this because, interestingly, the dual category is kind of lost. And the basic word order is also sometimes SVO, at least if you talk to elderly speakers who show much more variation. But these two traits are very important for the younger generation who really long for this differences and these means of creating an identity that is in opposition to the majority society and language. Yeah, I already said this. SOV occurs as well, and UL is hardly in use. Jumping back in time, we have loan words, not only today, but from, well, 1,800 years ago until latest 1,500 years ago, so old loan words. And they are usually in the domain of sea and seafaring, domestic animal herding, agriculture, iron production, fur trade, and even marriage and family. So where we find loan words in South Sami, or in what is today South Sami, from what is today Swedish and Norwegian. So you're seeing that I'm kind of mixing a bit time layers here, but this is important for understanding the situation of South Sami today. So bear with me. Also, at the point of the earliest contact, we can't speak of South Sami or Swedish and Norwegian, of course, but I will talk about this later in a second. Recent loanwords, of course, the language is in great need of new words to be able to function in modern society. So they are taking, of course, in new words for car, computer, and so on. The early contact is a time frame that is set between 0 and 500 Common Era. And the question of ethnicity, of course, is difficult because they weren't South Sami, and it is difficult to talk about Sami as well. They were just kind of forming the languages. I think it's very good to use Minerva Piha's term, Southern Proto-Sami, for this area. And the correspondent in for Norwegian and Swedish would be Proto-Norse. So we have two proto-languages that we compare with each other here. And of course, we should not be blind that we put a linguistic group up to each other, and that might not be entirely overlapping with a cultural group. Yeah, the linguistic material to show contact are loanwords in the domains that I just mentioned. There's also a lot of archaeological material, which are graves, hunting grounds, iron manufacturing, and dwelling sites. And if we move on to maybe kind of the Middle Ages, or the Vendel and Viking area and the early Middle Ages, especially pre-Christianization, we have a lot of contact between Sami and Scandinavian people. And you can look at the map to the right. We can also see that most contact has happened in the southern area of the Sami area. We have evidence for a lot of cultural contact. We have the loan words. We have perhaps Sami substrates in Scandinavian languages. And we also have, livelihood influence. And that is the hypothesis that is becoming much stronger now, that the early South Sami people have been domestic animal herders. And Ruta is asking why the Sami would borrow words in the domain of marriage and family. and if this would not be more a conservative domain due to its cultural associations? Well, it's a very good question. You would also find loanwords in other very sort of core domains of the language. Religion, for instance, is also influenced by Scandinavian or Old or Proto-Norse loanwords. Well, why? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe other people would know a bit more. But I guess it comes back to what you, I believe, are discussing, and that is we don't always know why contact occurs and what makes people to borrow or to share traits. I think that's not very predictable, but it shows that the language is in contact since very long and is well, really intertwined. Personally, I think the yeah, and we're getting to this. I think the early Middle Ages, the pre-Christianization time, is really interesting. Now I'm speaking about all Sami, and that is the Sami did not seem to be as stigmatized as they are now, and there are some beautiful mentions in the Norse sagas about the greatness of Sami as hunters, or as archers, or as boat builders, or as wise men, and so on. And Norway's first king, Harald Hårfagre, had a Sami wife, and that was high status. So yeah, cool stuff, I think. Yeah, loanwords into Sami and loanwords or substrates into Scandinavian. There's a guy, Yuri Kosmenko, a thick volume in German that you can read, who dived into this subject. And for instance, pre-aspiration could be a Sami thing that that would hop over into Scandinavian. I'm actually buying that, so I think I would dare to say that pre-aspiration is a Sami thing in Scandinavian. We have lots of cultural symbols that show contact, for instance, combs and graves and stuff. Also a spade found on Iceland that has runic inscriptions with Sami words, which is pretty cool. Yeah, and this high status of Sami among Scandinavians in pre-Christianization and Norse sagas, and I just mentioned. Later contact being the last 400 or 500 years or so, we have written sources that puts the Sami in, well, the area where I live, from around 1600 and onwards in written documents, so they must have been here before. And in, well, the last century and kind of ongoing, we had pretty harsh assimilation politics. Do you all know what I mean by assimilation politics, or should I elaborate? Yes, okay. So maybe I can add that the Norwegian and the Swedish state weren't like relocating Sami by taking them and moving them, or they weren't killing them, but they were using politics in order to suppress and well, also to relocate Sami. Modern society would not allow you to live at the place where you grew up, for instance, or you would I don't know, you were not allowed to have reindeer any longer, or things like that. So they're very efficient at interrupting the transmission of the language. So today, as already mentioned in the beginning, all Sami are bilingual. Now moving into something which I think will be important for the remainder of the talk, and when we discuss the grammar depth questions as well. and that is that a South Sami person might view themselves just as Scandinavian as they are Sami. So they don't usually have, I don't know, 200% identities of being Sami and Scandinavian. And well, let's say the Scandinavian part of their life or identity does usually not differ from other Scandinavian identities or Scandinavians living a modern life. Yeah, we have an answer from Maxime about intermarriage that could explain languages to borrow. We don't know, of course, how people would marry 1,500 years ago, but I believe that they probably stuck more to each other than it wasn't. They had contact, but I don't. Well, they have not been mixed to the degree that we have one equally mixed homogeneous group. But of course, this it shows that Scandinavian languages have been part of very core domains such as family or marrying and stuff. However, contact today is a bit different than maybe just 15 years ago, and that is the self-confidence and the pride of being Sami, much more activism, much more rights. Rights does not always mean that you actually get what you have the right to get, but in theory, you could even apply for your kid to be placed in a Kemi-Sami daycare if you live in Stockholm. And well, it's probably hard to find a Kemi-Sami speaker that works in daycare, but yeah, you have all kinds of rights. And really great efforts of revitalizing the language. That was the first part about the history and the contact. Do you have any questions so far? I will continue with the GrammarDept dataset, which I guess you have been introduced to. Yeah. So we have lots of questions which ask about the kind of contact, duration, and well, given the two languages questions I got, you are already thinking about the kind of social context that languages can have, or speakers of languages can have. The challenge with South Sami is, well, GrammarAdapt isn't about a synchronic, isn't a synchronic, a diachronic database, of course, but it was difficult for me to only take into account the language situation today. So I chose to answer the questions also with respect to a quite long time frame. And South Sami had to become South Sami, but also the contact languages Norwegian and Swedish had to become these. So we start at a stage where these languages had been proto-languages, and we are then today with languages that are still in contact and still borrow and well are still in cultural exchange and so on. And in answering the questions about South Sami, it was also difficult because there are so many unanswered questions when it comes to Sami history or ethnogenesis in general. But that said, let's look at a set of questions and how I answered them, and we can discuss why I came to this conclusion, or what the challenges are with these questions in the light of South Sami. One of the first question was, how long have South Sami and Scandinavian people been in contact overall? And we can establish by now that if we take into account that we don't speak about South Sami and Swedish/Norwegian, then we can say since maybe the year 200, something around that. And we have definitely a lot of contact in the Viking and Age and the early Middle Ages. And if I now write South Sami, I mean the correspondent stage of the people or the language, the people that speak the language or the language. So I guess this was kind of straightforward given the most recent research. What is the overall time frame when the largest number of people had the most opportunities for interaction? That is difficult to assess since we don't have any total numbers. Of course, we are much more people today than 500 or 1,000 years ago and so on. But how do you establish the largest number of people or the percentage of people that could meet or interact with each other? I don't really know, to be honest. Kind of today, but at the same time, as I mentioned in the first part, most South Sami don't speak South Sami. So I could answer today is the time and include, I don't know, the last 50 years or so as a time frame. But then I neglect the fact that it's not the languages that have contact, it's the people. Yeah. What is the total number of native-like speakers of South Sami? We've been discussing this. But what is the total number of native-like speakers of the contact languages? Might be interesting to know. And for Swedish, this is about 10 million, and for Norwegian, this is about 5 million. However, no, they are out of order. Yeah. However, what might be interesting to know is what's the population density within the area where there's interaction. And that is very low, a bit lower than other areas in Norway or Sweden, where we have I don't know, southern Sweden or so has a higher population density than where you have the traditional South Sami area. So there are a few people and they are spread over a very large area. Need to go back because these were not in the right order. What is the approximate proportion of native-like speakers in the total population of all speakers of South Sami? So I would like to change the speakers into members of the South Sami community, since the population is very low. As I said in the beginning, we don't have any official numbers, but let's say that we have 2,000 to 3,000 South Sami and we have maybe 500 speakers. That would be 20% or so, which is also true for the Sami population in general. So we have maybe 100,000 people identifying them as Sami, and we maybe have 20,000 speakers of a Samic language. And what is the approximate proportion of native-like speakers in the total population of all speakers of Norwegian? That's 100%. And of course, since they are bilingual, the Sami, they are also counted into this. Yeah, we've been looking at this. What is the mean size of the South Sami speaking communities at the local level? Usually you would have these larger families, which are an important unit in the Sami society. Today, I would say the most important South Sami speaking communities are schools and language centers, because then you have a kind of milieu, a community that centers around revitalizing the language, which is a very important domain today. But how many people are at a Sami school? Maybe around 50, and I would say usually you would have fewer people than that, which form sort of a society at community level. How frequently do South Sami people generally interact with out-group people? Well, kind of all the time. Of course, you have exceptions. Usually, the traditional view is that Sami are reindeer herders, and none has asked that question yet. But interestingly, for South Sami, reindeer herding is not a very strong domain for the language, and we will talk about this as well. It is still a male-dominated area, reindeer herding, and usually it's the women who speak more Sami than the men. So if we say that we have people that are mostly out in the field, in the mountains, maybe they don't interact that much, but perhaps they're just talking Swedish and Norwegian with maybe South Sami words. Yeah, and so the answer would be very frequently, basically all the time, since they are fully integrated in the modern society. I would rather need to put the question upside down and ask, are there occasions where there's a majority of South Sami gathering, and where you would see South Sami being used as the first language? I think a couple of such meetings, cultural festivals, gatherings, and usually you see the first language speakers, and the old ladies, and they drink coffee around the table, and they chat away in South Sami. But everyone else, probably not. So even if they interact among themselves, it's not given that South Sami, even if you have a high percentage of speakers represented, that they would naturally use this language. This might be changing, since we have a new speaker group emerging of people who are, again, more firm in the language. Is there a codified standard variety for South Sami? And the answer is yes, and I could be going on about this topic for very long. Since it is also quite interesting. South Sami has an orthography, which is older than 40 years by now, and which is used, and which most people have the competence to use. So most people know how to write, and they have a written standard, and the language is also being standardized because of this written standard. I say written standard, and there's no codified standard spoken variety of South Sami. However, if you learn a language as a second language learners in a classroom setting, you are, of course, doing what happens when people in Germany learn Norwegian, which I never did. I learned Swedish. But of course, you don't learn a dialect, but you learn maybe your teacher's dialect plus your textbook standard written Norwegian. So we don't have a spoken standard of South Sami yet, but maybe new speakers are creating that kind of standard. as we speak, as they speak. Moving on to the next question. What are the South Sami speakers' attitudes towards linguistic transfers from Scandinavian, such as lexical or grammatical borrowing? So interestingly, it's usually lexical borrowing, and it's usually also nouns. For my thesis, I collected data of spoken language, and I created a little corpus that I can search in, and I checked the percentages for loanwords in verbs and nouns and other domains, and I found much more borrowings in the domain of nouns than in other domains. Yeah, and grammatical borrowings, well, there are these influences like word order or loss of duo that I mentioned. The attitudes are, I would say, neither positive or negative in the context of GrammarAdapt, and it very much depends. But in general, and that is also, I think, interesting in the context scenario, that second language speakers are much more conservative than their grandparents. So you would find the most casual South Sami among the oldest generation of speakers. Yeah, and of course the language needs and does undergo language planning. They need to do this. They need to have the standard in order to teach, but it also takes away some variation. Some, I don't know. Yeah, some older speakers are missing a level of language that makes the language vibrant or lively. Moving on. How significant is language as part of group identity for the speakers of South Sami? And that was a very central question for South Sami, and the answer is very significant. If there are any Scandinavian speakers amongst you, you might understand hjertespråk, the language of the heart, and people would say a Sami. I met many Sami, South Sami, or other Sami who would say, the language of my heart is Sami, but I don't speak it. I speak Norwegian, and I'm learning the Sami variety X. So language is extremely important, even if they don't always speak it. And yeah, you can think about that. An odd thing that South Sami do, which to my knowledge, no other Sami or no other representatives of other Samic languages do. They use kinship terms from the South Sami kinship terms when they speak to outsiders. So they would say grandmother or father or mother, sister, and so on. They would just talk Norwegian or Swedish, and they just would put in this word in South Sami, and they kind of expect people to understand. Maybe they translate, but this is a very important marker of identity. There's a question: do the Sami have some kind of Sami country whose territory overlaps with the states of Norway, Sweden, and Finland? Yeah, that's a very good question, and the answer is yes. And that's kind of the whole point. They share the territory, and the area where I am, which is just outside the area that is traditionally defined as Sami. Oh, did I put SIS? South Sami, South. That's how I sometimes abbreviate South Sami. So the point is that we have an overlap in territory, and we have constant argues about the right of people to land access, and in this border area, reindeer would come down and eat the crops of the farmers, and the farmers would get angry, and then you have the national borders, and then they put up a fence between Norway and Sweden, and the reindeer were stuck on one side or the other, and the Sami were stuck on the one side or the other, and this created tension, and this tension was, of course, intensified by the expansion of Scandinavian settlers further into the mountains. So it is very difficult to talk about what is Sami land and what is Norwegian land or Swedish land, since they since long have been sharing an area, and maybe back in time this was less problematic. Yeah, space. Everyone needs space. Sorry, that was not about this question, but I think it was important to answer this now. So coming back to this question, I'm very thankful for these comments, because it means that you are thinking and you need this information. Sharia. Yes, very good. Yeah, so the language as a means of identity is extremely important. South Sami people's language loyalty towards South Sami can be characterized as, and then I had to choose. And then it's like, loyalty towards South Sami. It very much depends. Of course, they would be loyal if they had the language at hand, but they don't. And they are loyal in the respect that many Sami, and I'm always amazed when I don't know, meet 15 years old year olds that are really trying to learn the language. They really try to revitalize and reclaim the language. But of course, this is difficult. So I can't really answer this question based on the situation for South Sami. What is the approximate rate of formal literacy in the South Sami speaking community? And this is also pretty interesting, I think. The answer is high, very high. I would say 100%. There are no cultural restrictions or social restrictions of learning to write. Again, all Sami are also part of modern Scandinavian society and attend school, so they know how to write Norwegian, Swedish, but also I have hardly met a South Sami. I met one, and that was a very, very interesting and very important consultant. There are hardly any Sami who have not any formal education in their own language. I'm not sure if this is weird in a global setting. Maybe, Xenia, you know something about this, but I think it's quite interesting for such a small population, and since long, if you meet old Sami, then they have taken one course here or there, and they met that professor in Finno-Ugristics in the 50s, and that professor would tell them stuff that is not true according to their dialect, and then they're very confused back then. But today, I have there are several linguists, academics who are Sami, and yeah, so the level of formal education is very high on a community level. And I mentioned this very briefly. There are language technology tools developed and available. There are spell checkers and grammar checkers for South Sami, for instance. Not many know about them, and not many use them. That's my current task to inform people as well about. But yeah, given the size of the language, I think it's quite interesting that you have all this technology. The South Sami speaking society's subsistence pattern can be broadly characterized as highly mixed. South Sami occupy all levels and all kinds of subsistence, from reindeer herding to seasonal workers, medical doctors, academic staff, or linguists. Yeah, that was part one, grammar depth. And I think it's time for you to do some exercise so you don't fall asleep. The exercise that I planned is in pairs that you discuss and present for each other a minority language that you either know or work with, and briefly discuss the setting of the language, its contact with other languages, and how that contact has influenced or influences that language. I allotted 20 minutes. Maybe let's cut this to 15. Yeah, 10?
Yeah, well, maybe it depends on how much you have left, but maybe around 12 minutes or yeah, something like that.
Yeah, good. Be creative. I mean, you are in front of a screen, so use databases, GramBank, Walls, Maps, Wikipedia. I like maps. And just think of that you had to have a tiny presentation for the rest of us afterwards. So I will put you in randomly assigned.
Well, I have already started doing this, so
Right.
I'll just
Cool. Yes, pairs. Yeah.
yes.
Great.
So I'm putting people in pairs.
Sweet. Yeah, so let's say 12 minutes, so 19:15.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Good, I think we should be back all together. Great. Did that work out for you? Can I get a nod or a one in the chat?
Yes, I learned a lot. Thank you.
That's good. I think you probably have, I mean, the combined expertise is probably quite large in the group. So I hope. I would have loved to hear what you've been saying. Yeah, cool, great. Yeah, so for the reminder of the talk, I will just cruise through maybe another 10 or so slides from the grammar depth. Then I have 5-6 slides about typological traits, and then I hope we have maybe 5 to 10 minutes for 5 minutes for questions or discussions. How long time have you spent working with this community? And you might have just talked about this about your language, but for my part, I have never been in the field for super long, and that is also because the field is so close. When I still lived in Sweden, I was in the field in a day's driving. Maybe I spent a total of 15 weeks in the field. I kind of still do field work. I think, yeah, at the beginning of the month, I've been doing field work with my main consultant, which takes me just over an hour to get there now. So it's quite handy to live here, actually. And it justifies my home office since I'm quite far away from Tromsø. Yeah, if I flew southwards from Oslo instead of northwards to Tromsø, I would fly past you, Xenia, in Munich. Well, anyway, whom did you mostly interact with? My main language consultant, whom I also visited the other day, is an elderly woman who lives in a Swedish municipality close to the border to Norway. First language speaker. She was born into a reindeer herding family and grew up with South Sami as the primary language in the community. She learned Swedish from the age of 4 or 5. And I would say that this is a typical speaker of South Sami. So you have an elderly woman and they grew up in the environment of traditional livelihood, but are now in a slightly different area, and yeah, so I don't have lots of elderly men, for instance, as speakers. How would you rate the overall relationship between South Sami and Scandinavian people in the domain of exchange? I included a couple of questions that are represented quite frequently as a domain in the GramAdapt questionnaire, but some of them are, I don't know, maybe not so relevant for South Sami, and I will just I included them to maybe problematize answering them. So, well, the relationship is friendly. It depends if you like someone you work with or not, or if you like the person that you meet on the street. But in general, they are equal parts of the same society or country or nation. What is the overall level of affection that the South Sami persons has towards their Scandinavian spouse? Well, I hope very affectionate. But I mean, it got me thinking. Of course, there are settings where you would have, I don't know, where this would not be equal to, I don't know, Scandinavian, pure Scandinavian or Sami relations. Do South Sami people typically simplify their language when speaking with their Scandinavian spouse? No, probably not. Well, for the first, if the spouse does not speak Sami, then they would speak the other first language of the Sami. I have a couple of instances where the Scandinavian partner, really learned the Sami variety and has become a good speaker of Sami. But I have never heard something about simplifying. What I encountered while doing field work is that again, my prime consultant, she did not use the dialectal forms. So she would adapt her spoken language more to to a spoken written standard. But other than this adaptation, so not speaking a dialect is probably something that you do when you speak to other people that speak the same language as you otherwise that you don't know, but not simplifying. Typically, how much supervision do grandparents provide to children? Well, it depends. It very much depends. There are they might live close or they might live far away. What language do South Sami parents typically speak with their children? It very much depends. But those who speak South Sami are very eager to transmit the language. So there is a great awareness and a very high level of self-reflection among the Sami population. Typically, how well does a South Sami person understand the Scandinavian in-laws language? Well, I would say very well. How long have Sami and Scandinavian people worked together? Since we can call them South Sami and Norwegian and Swedish, today they share workplaces and they might have just the same job, teachers. How long have South Sami and Scandinavian people been in contact in their local community? So this differs a bit of in respect to the first question, how long have they had contact, but at the local community. And when you pick out some sort of local settings, then you, of course, can say something more specific. I will leave it by that. What other languages, if any, are spoken in the local community? In some areas, we have North Sami. I will also just touch on this very briefly since I'm running out of time. I thought I had enough time for one time, but no, which is a good sign. Some North Sami were relocated into South Sami areas, but it is very unlikely that this had any impact beyond the very individual influence. The domain of South Sami is the nuclear family. That is the typical setting. Today, we are working on expanding these domains. That's one of the big challenges in revitalization. What is the language in a mixed marriage family? Is it always Norwegian, Swedish? I would say so. Like on an anecdotal level, I know the Scandinavian wife of a South Sami priest. They are very active members in the South Sami society. She is one of the most prominent people that produce written South Sami, but she does not talk that much. So she's much more fluent in writing than in speaking. So they try to speak and they might improve in speaking, but she's a much better writer than speaker. And that is true for many other people who, South Sami, who have knowledge in the language. Yeah, and how often do the Scandinavian spouse learn Sami language? It also depends. It depends on where they live. It depends on if the Sami person moved to Oslo or Fredrikstad or somewhere else, or if the Scandinavian spouse is in a more traditional area. That's a good question. Yeah. I got the opportunity to list any comments or notes that I felt were relevant to that particular question in the questionnaire, and I'm wrapping up now. It is difficult to separate South Sami and Swedish Norwegian. I have not talked about that I collapsed Swedish Norwegian as one contact language, but I think you understand that it was meaningful to do. The situations differ a bit, but and the languages are a tiny bit different. But in the end, it is meaningful to talk about the contact language, Swedish Norwegian. Yeah. South Sami are well integrated in the respective majority societies. Scandinavia has usually a flat hierarchy, little or no restrictions, constraints to interaction, exchange, or the like. Also, most South Sami have both a Sami and a Scandinavian identity. So, a quick assessment from the perspective of South Sami. South Sami are also Scandinavian. They partake in all discourses in modern society. Contact is constantly ongoing. South Sami children attend daycare, schools, like anyone else. South Sami have the same jobs like everyone else. Maybe you could say that the Sami culture or identity can be kind of placed on top or in addition to a Swedish or Norwegian identity. I'm not sure if all South Sami would agree with this wording, or if I could probably find a better wording. But yeah, let's talk about this as having two full equal identities. Yeah, with a couple of minutes left, is it okay if I continue for another 5 minutes?
Yeah, definitely okay for me. I guess if someone really needs
Yeah.
to leave, then of course you can leave and we won't judge you, but please continue.
Yeah, you see that I didn't test the presentation lengthwise, but I thought half the slides were well, anyway. Yeah, so this is about the GramAdapt questionnaire, which was interesting to answer. In my catchy title, I had defined by differences. And since you also talked about typology, and since this is also more closer to my field of expertise, I, of course, wanted to include a couple of grammatical traits that set South Sami apart from other Samic and often Finnic languages. So I mentioned SOV already, a genitive possessive that you would find in Mari, for instance, but not in other Finnic or Samic languages. We don't have any stem gradation, otherwise something that is very Sami or Finnish. We have a couple of sound changes that you don't have in the other languages, and so on. So to give you a couple of maps, because as I said, we like maps. They are taken from the EuroType database, a database that has looked into specific questions that are features that are important for Uralic languages. Half of the questions are also in GramBank, the other large database that I hope all of you know of. Super, thanks for the link. Xenia in the chat, there's a link to the database. So basic word order SOV, we find in South Sami, in Skolt Sami, not really in the rest of the Samic languages, not in the Finnic languages, but then further east. Genitive possessive, we find in South Sami as the most idiomatic way of expressing possession. So mine is a car, or my is a dog, or my are children, in order to say I have kids, I have a car, and so on. We don't find this at all in the neighboring languages. We need to move into the central and east Uralic area in order to find languages that have the same construction. Stem gradation, really an odd one out. South Sami has no stem gradation. They have a couple of umlaut vowel assimilations that you could compare to Germanic ones. Otherwise, they're just black dots, which are really different. Tense marked on the negative auxiliary. Yeah, not going into this construction, but anyway, you see that usually in Samic and Finnic languages, you don't have this kind of marking. But you have it again further to the east and in South Sami. No copula in constructions with predicate nominals like Xenia professor. Not Xenia is a professor. You find this in South Sami, and that is the very common way to express these kind of constructions, but not in any of the other Samic or Finnic languages. But again, further to the east. Differential object marking, you find it in South Sami, you find it further east, you don't find it in the neighboring Finnic or Samic languages. Yeah, however, the similarities are numerous. We have the loanwords, the modern loanwords. We have calques. I would dare to say that phonology is not so different. The South Sami phonology compare, or at least the phonotax to Swedish Scandinavian. It is very, very complex. My phonology chapter was the first phonology chapter that can be called phonology chapter for South Sami in the grammar. People have been delving into phonetics a lot since they are Finno-Ugrists. They did that. But phonology is very complex, but I find a lot of traits that resemble Finnish and Swedish. Of course, influence on morphosyntactic constructions, SVO, the have possessive that they also have in addition to the genitive possessive, a relative pronoun that from being a fully inflected pronoun with cases and numbers becoming more a particle, like in Scandinavian languages. A particle-like use of the negative auxiliary, what has happened in Estonia, and the loss of dual verb morphology. Yeah, so this was about some similarities and main takeaways. Proto-Southern Sami evolved into Southern Sami in central Scandinavia. It was in the place where contact happened, where it evolved into the language that we now call South Sami. The contact has been going on since forever. South Sami differs typologically from other Samic languages, but it shares a lots of traits with other Uralic languages further in the east. And there is, of course, a great Scandinavian impact on the language. And Sami today are also equally Scandinavians, so it's difficult to split these entirely. I will read through the questions. So thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions or comments, shoot me an email and I will look into the questions now. Do South Sami distinguish two sets of possessives? That is my versus mine. No, they don't have any possessive suffixes. They have kind of a suffix that works similar to a possessive suffix, but it's not a possessive suffix. And they have regular adnominal possession with my x, and the predicative possession is either the have possessive or the my is x, my are x. Why is South Sami different from almost all other Samic languages in so many grammatical features? Well, that takes us back to the start. The fact that South Sami or Proto-Southern Sami disintegrated from the other Samic languages, or what became the other Samic languages, very, very early, around the year of like 2000 years ago, in somewhere Western Finland. What is today South Sami left the rest of the group. That is probably the best explanation that we can give. I think it's supported by especially linguistic facts and the loan words, old loan words. I think I will stop here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for turning on your cameras at the end. That was nice to see a couple of you. I will stop there sharing.